She planned to destroy me at her wedding. He had other plans. There were 11 cameras in that ballroom. I counted them while the quartet was still tuning because counting kept my hands from shaking, 1 above the altar, 2 on tripods in the aisle, a live stream rig at the back with a red light that never blinked. My sister did not invite me to her wedding because she loved me, not because I was her only sibling, not because some part of her still remembered who used to sit outside her door when she had nightmares. Vivian invited me because a spotlight needs a shadow, and she wanted 200 people to watch her step on mine. What she didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, including me, was that the man standing at the altar in a $9,000 tuxedo had made a promise 4 years earlier, on his knees, on a bakery floor, at 2 a.m, and in about 11 minutes he was going to keep it. The Camellia House sat on the bluff above the Savannah River, like a dream somebody else had paid for. Restored brick, oyster shell paths, Spanish moss dripping off the live oak so perfectly you'd swear the trees had been styled. Inside, 2,000 white roses hung from the ceiling on invisible wire, so the flowers looked like they were floating. That was Vivian. Every angle had to flatter her. Every tear had to fall on the beat. My sister wasn't just a bride, she was a business. Vivian Vance, destination wedding designer, 2.1 million followers. The woman who taught other women how to build a perfect day, a perfect proposal, a perfect love story. Her whole empire rested on one idea, that she knew what real love looked like. Her wedding was supposed to be the proof, and I was supposed to be the before picture. They seated me in the 4th row from the back, not with family. My place card sat between a great aunt who kept asking who I was, and one of Vivian's junior planners who answered emails through the whole ceremony. Across the aisle, front row, my mother sat in champagne silk with her chin lifted, wearing the expression she saved exclusively for Vivian. Diane Vance had a face for 2 occasions, pride and disappointment. I had only ever been shown the second one. She didn't look back once. My father was beside her. Walter Vance looked smaller than I remembered. Hands folded like a man in a waiting room. He turned around exactly 1 time. Our eyes met for half a second. Then he looked away. That was my father's entire contribution to my childhood, he knew, and he looked away. 3 weeks before, Vivian had come to my apartment with a garment bag and a smile like a knife in a cake box. Inside was a dress in a color she called ash, pale gray, expensive, beautiful the way a hospital gown can be beautiful if you spend enough on it. I picked your color, she said, so you don't feel out of place. I knew exactly what she meant. Gray would let me vanish into the walls. So that morning I left it hanging in my closet and put on the deep green dress I bought with my own money. Simple, knee-length, nothing dramatic, nothing that could be called a challenge, unless somebody had already decided my existence was one. When Vivian saw me walk in, her face did the thing I'd watched it do my whole life. A flicker, a hardening at the mouth. Then a photographer turned, and she was sunlight again. "Nora," she called out, sweet enough for the nearby rows, "you came. You invited me. I wasn't sure you'd be brave enough." I felt the old gravity in my chest. Lower your eyes. Make it easier. Let Vivian have the room. I sat down instead. At the front, under the arch, stood Daniel Reyes. I promised myself I wouldn't look at him. I lasted 4 minutes. 4 years since he disappeared without one honest goodbye. 4 years since I stood in the rain outside an empty apartment on Wahlberg Street asking a locked door for an explanation. 4 years of building a small, quiet life with a hole in the middle of it that I learned to walk around instead of through. He looked older, sharper around the eyes. The tuxedo fit him perfectly. His face didn't. He stood next to my sister like a man trying to remember how he'd arrived somewhere he never meant to be. Then the officiant stepped forward, and Vivian raised one delicate hand. "Before we begin," she said, voice going warm and honeyed, "Daniel and I put together a short family tribute. I wanted to honor the people who shaped us, especially the ones who taught us what sacrifice really means." A murmur of approval. Somebody said, "Aw." The lights dimmed. A screen came down behind the altar. My stomach turned to ice water. Nobody had told me about a tribute. Piano music, tasteful. The first photos were harmless. Vivian as a baby, Vivian at 6 in a recital tutu, Vivian at graduation, Vivian on a beach with a clipboard, laughing at something off camera. Then the screen changed. There I was, 15, standing behind Vivian at her 9th birthday, holding the cake while she blew out the candles, my face half out of frame. Next, me at 24 in my bakery apron, flour to my elbows, hair scraped back, wiping down a case at the end of a 14-hour shift. Next, me in a winter coat 2 sizes too big, standing beside Vivian in designer silk, cropped so I was cut off at the shoulder like someone who'd wandered into the shot. A few people laughed, politely, the way you laugh when you're not sure yet. It kept going. Photo after photo of me in the background, carrying boxes at her events, holding her purse, at the edge of family pictures, always behind her, always smaller, always useful. Vivian lifted the microphone and gave the room her softest smile. My sister Nora has always been part of my story, she said. She's the one who taught me what sacrifice looks like. Warm laughter. They thought it was sweet. Then she turned, just enough to face me, not so much that she lost her light. Of course, some people sacrifice because they're generous, and some people sacrifice because they've got nothing else to offer. The laughter got louder. Not everyone. Enough. Heat crawled up my neck. My mouth went dry. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. Don't cry. Do not give her that. She has 11 cameras and she wants her fate. And then my sister said the line she'd clearly been saving. You're nothing, Nora. You always have been. The room went still. She tilted her head, and her voice dropped into something sweet enough to poison tea. Nobody has ever chosen you, not even him. Somebody gasped. Somebody whispered my name like a warning. The quartet had stopped playing, and nobody had told them to. My mother didn't move. My father closed his eyes. I pressed my hands together until my knuckles ached because I'd made myself a promise in the parking lot 40 minutes earlier. I would not break in that room, not in front of her clients, not in front of 200 strangers who'd just been handed a version of me I never got to write. The officiant cleared his throat. Perhaps we should proceed to the vows. Vivian turned back to Daniel, smiling like she hadn't just opened me up in front of the whole room and called it a tribute. Ready? She whispered. He didn't answer. At first I thought I imagined the change in his face. It was small, a tightening at the jaw, his eyes moving past her, up to the screen, where the last image still glowed. That photo of me in the bakery. 24, apron, flour, exhaustion. But Daniel wasn't looking at me in that picture. He was looking at what sat on the counter behind my shoulder. A small green tin box. His face went white. To understand why one small green box detonated a $200,000 wedding, you need to know what was inside it. And to understand that, you need to know how many years I spent on my knees for my sister first. I was 4 when Vivian came home from the hospital. My mother looked at that baby like the universe had finally corrected a clerical error. Then she brushed the hair out of my eyes and said the sentence that became the operating system of my entire childhood. You're the older one now, Nora. You have to be gentle. At first, gentle meant simple things. Don't touch Vivian's toys, even the ones that used to be yours. Don't cry loudly, it upsets her. Don't ask for too much, because your sister needs more. By the time I was 7, gentle had become generous. By 9, generous had become quiet. By 11, quiet had become invisible. Vivian learned the rules faster than any of us. If she wanted the last slice, her lip trembled. If she wanted the yellow bike I'd saved 2 summers of birthday money for, she held it against her chest and whispered, "But I love it so much." And every single time my mother would look at me, not at her, never at her, with that tired sigh, like I'd ruined the day by wanting something. Nora, you're older. Let her have it. So I let her have it. The bike, the bigger bedroom, the new coat, the attention at dinner. I got very good at smiling before anybody asked me to. What a mature girl, people said. Such a good big sister. I learned young that adults adore a child who makes their life easier. I also learned that being good does not get you loved more. It just gets you asked to disappear more politely. The first time I understood that, I was 11. I'd asked for a small birthday party. Pizza, a grocery store cake, 3 girls from school. I taped blue streamers to the doorframe myself, because blue was my color, the one thing in that house that was still mine. 20 minutes before my friends arrived, Vivian came downstairs crying about a stain on her white dress. Then she saw my birthday dress on the back of a chair, pale blue, new, mine. She stopped crying long enough to touch the sleeve. I want this one. I looked at my mother before I looked at my sister, because I already knew where the verdict was coming from. Nora, she's having a hard day. It's my birthday. Her face tightened. Don't be selfish, you're the older one. So Vivian wore my dress to my party. In every photo from that day, my little sister is in pale blue, glowing beside my cake. I'm next to her in an old mustard cardigan, hands clasped, trying not to look like I'd been evicted from my own birthday. 16 years later, she posted one of those pictures with the caption, "My big sister always gave me the best of everything, 4,000 hearts." Nobody asked whether I'd been given a choice. My father noticed. That's the part that took me longest to forgive. Walter Vance wasn't cruel. He was absent in the specific way a man can be absent while sitting 3 feet from you. He'd watch my mother rule in Vivian's favor, and something would move behind his eyes. Regret, maybe. Shame. But knowing is not the same as standing up. The year I turned 13, I won a citywide writing contest. Small thing. It mattered to nobody but me, and to my English teacher, who kept me after class and said, "You have a voice, Nora. Don't let anybody talk you out of it." The ceremony was a Thursday. I taped the flyer to the fridge under the strawberry magnet. That same Thursday, Vivian's piano teacher called about a cancellation in the spring showcase. My mother lit up like somebody had handed her a crown. "My award ceremony's tonight," I said. She didn't turn around. "Nora, this is important for your sister." I practiced too. The kitchen went silent. Vivian sat at the table swinging her legs, watching me with that small private smile I'd already learned to dread. My mother finally faced me. "Don't make your sister feel guilty for having an opportunity." So they went to the showcase, and I went to the ceremony alone. My teacher sat beside me so I wouldn't be the only kid in the row without family. They called my name. I took a certificate with a little gold seal and smiled the way I'd practiced in the bathroom mirror. Afterward, I stood outside under the yellow lights, watching other kids pose with their parents. My father pulled up 20 minutes late, not late enough to see me win, just late enough to see me standing alone. His whole face collapsed when he saw the folded program in my hand. "Nora, I'm sorry." I wanted to say it was fine. That's what good daughters did. Instead, I heard myself ask, "Did Vivian play well?" He closed his eyes a second. Then he reached into the passenger seat and pulled out a paper bag from the bookstore on Bull Street. Inside was a plain black composition notebook. $4 probably. "Thought of you." He tapped the cover once. "Write it down, kid. Someday your truth's gonna need somewhere to live." When we got home, Vivian's showcase program was already on the refrigerator. Mine stayed in my backpack. So I sat on my bedroom floor, opened that notebook, and wrote the first sentence I'd never been brave enough to say out loud. "I'm tired of being the good one." After that, I wrote everything. Every birthday I gave away. Every apology I made when she'd hurt me first. Every time my mother called me selfish for wanting something that already belonged to me. That notebook became the only place on earth where I was allowed to exist at full size. Remember it. It matters more than anything else in this story. For years I thought Vivian took my things because she was spoiled. The bike, the dress, the room, the easy love. I was wrong. Vivian didn't want what I had. She wanted proof that she could take it. And the first thing she ever stole from me wasn't Daniel. It was my voice. I was 22. Vivian was 18, beautiful in that effortless way people reward long before you've done anything to deserve it, with a genius for looking fragile whenever responsibility got within arm's reach. The essay was supposed to be hers, a national scholarship attached to a private university she wanted. Write about a challenge that shaped how you see the world. She left it until the last week, then appeared in my doorway on a Sunday night with her laptop and the soft, helpless tears she could produce on command. There were 4 sentences on the page. They weren't bad. They were worse than bad. They were empty. "Why didn't you start earlier?" Her face changed. Fast, the softness gone, and underneath was the sister I actually knew. Sharp, certain that being questioned was the same as being attacked. My mother was in the hallway before she could answer. "Nora's making me feel stupid," Vivian said. "Then help her." "I have work." "Your sister's future matters more than one shift at a bakery." That was her method. She never said my life was worthless. She just held it up next to Vivian's and let the comparison do the work. So I asked my sister questions. What had shaped her? What had she overcome? Every answer was air. She wanted a pretty campus. She wanted out of Savannah. She wanted people to take her seriously. That last one stopped me. Because God help me, I knew exactly what that felt like. So I opened a blank document and turned her nothing into something. I wrote about being underestimated, about growing up in the shadow of other people's expectations, about learning that a voice doesn't need permission to exist. The irony nearly split me in half. Make it sound like me, but smarter, she said, and left. I worked until 2 a.m. Not because I wanted her to win, because once I start writing, I can't make myself write badly. Not even for her. She submitted it under her name without reading the last 2 pages. 3 months later, she won. My mother screamed in the kitchen. Vivian jumped up and down. My father grinned with relief, like her success was a report card on the whole family. Read it out loud, my mother said. So Vivian read my words in her bright, confident voice. My mother cried. My father said, "That's beautiful, sweetheart." And halfway through, my sister looked up over the top of the phone, right at me. Just for a second. She knew. She knew exactly what she was reading. Afterward, I followed my mother into the laundry room. I wrote that essay. My voice shook, but I said it. For once in my life, I said it. She didn't look surprised. That hurt worse than if she had. She folded one of Vivian's sweaters, sleeve over sleeve. You helped your sister. No, I wrote it. She won a scholarship with my work. She finally looked at me, and her expression wasn't guilt. It was warning. Don't ruin this for her. Vivian needed it. You've always been the capable one. Let your sister have one win. One win. As if my silence hadn't been gift-wrapping her victories since I was 4 years old. And my mother knew exactly where to press. If you say anything, you'll look jealous. Bitter. Cruel. Is that who you want to be? That was the trap. Vivian got to act. I only got to react, and my reaction would always be the uglier thing. So I said nothing. That night I filled 11 pages of the black notebook. The last line said, "She didn't steal it because she needed it. She stole it because it proved she could wear my voice better than I'm allowed to use it." Her scholarship letter went on the refrigerator. My certificate stayed in a shoebox under my bed. By 26, I'd finally gotten out. A 1-bedroom over a laundromat with a radiator that knocked like it owed somebody money. And a job I loved and never told my family about, because I learned what happened when the Vances saw something bright in my hands. They called it selfish until I gave it away. Dovetail Bakery opened at 5 a.m., which meant I got there at 1, night shift, 2 ovens, a radio that only got one station clearly, and the smell of butter and burnt sugar working so deep into my clothes I stopped being able to smell it on myself. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. If I shaped a loaf right, it came out right. If I worked hard, nobody handed the result to my sister and called it family. At least not at first. Daniel Reyes started on a Tuesday in November. He came through the back door carrying a crate of proofing baskets, hit the wet spot by the mop sink, went down on one knee, caught himself on the counter, and apologized. To the mop bucket, I laughed before I could stop myself. He looked up, mortified, rain in his hair, one sleeve soaked through. "Please tell me the bucket's not my supervisor." "Depends how well you listen to it." That was the first thing I ever said to him. He smiled like I'd handed him something valuable. Most people smile with their mouth first. Daniel smiled with his eyes, slowly, like light coming into a room, one curtain at a time. He was 30. Warehouse nights, roofing, deliveries, anything that paid enough to keep him moving. He took business classes at the tech college when he could afford them, and he mentioned it the way other people confess to a bad habit, like wanting more was embarrassing. We closed together 3 nights a week, and those hours became the first thing in my adult life that was fully mine. After the last tray came out, the world shrank down to warm ovens, a bad radio, and Daniel humming off key while he scrubbed the bench. He asked questions without cornering me. What did I read? Why did I write? What would I do if, for 1 entire year, nobody needed anything from me? I told him nobody had ever asked me that. He stopped wiping the counter. Then answer it carefully. First answers to new questions matter. So I told him, a train across the country, use bookstores in small towns, writing in diners at 4 in the afternoon when the light goes gold, sleeping late without feeling like a criminal. He listened like every word deserved a place to land. Then he said, "You know you don't have to be the strong one all the time." That took the legs out from under me, because in my family, strong had never been a compliment. It was a job description. Be strong so Vivian can fall apart. Be strong so Mom doesn't have to explain herself. Be strong so Dad can stay quiet. I turned away and rinsed a bowl that was already clean. He didn't push. 2 weeks later, he brought in a small green tin box, the kind you keep tea in. He set it on the break table at 3 a.m. and slid off the lid. Inside were blank index cards and a pen. "What is this?" "It's for the impossible stuff." He'd written on the lid in blocky handwriting, things we're allowed to want. My throat closed before I could make fun of him. He pushed the pen at me. No practical answers. "I'm a practical person." "I know. That's why you need rules." So I wrote the first card, a bookshop with a cafe in it, blue chairs. He read it, smiled, and wrote his own. A wall where strangers can leave notes for other strangers who need one. I wrote, "A scholarship for kids nobody believes in." His face went soft. Then he wrote, "A road trip with no destination and nobody calling to ask when we're coming back." The tin became ours, one card at a time. A dog with an unnecessarily serious name. Sunday mornings with no alarm. A life where love doesn't feel like a debt you're behind on. For the first time,